Well, good evening, everyone. I know that we have more people to join us, but we have a lot of questions to cover this evening. My name is Anthony Stewart, and I have the great privilege of being the Alumni Engagement Manager for Broward College. As you may know, since 1960, Broward College has had 1 million people come through its doors. Those are people who have come and taken a few courses or graduated. So this college has had an incredible impact in this community, in our own backyard here for since 1960. The Alumni and Friends is the official alumni network for Broward College, and we are delighted to be able to offer experiences like this to the community, both the alumni and our friends. This evening, I have the great privilege and honor to introduce Desiree Avila as our expert speaker for today's webinar. Desiree is not just a seasoned realtor, but also an educator at heart with a history as an award-winning teacher. She stands among the top 0.008%, that's the top, only one of 20 realtors in Florida with board certification. She's been voted as the best real estate professional in Oakland Park for 2023. And she has numerous accolades, including being a top producer, Millennium Club member. It's been featured in prestigious publications like the Wall Street Journal and the US News and World Report. She brings a wealth of knowledge and expertise to the discussion today. Desiree is also an alumna, like many of our 1 million alumni throughout the college, the history of Broward College, who have come and taken a few courses and then went on to do great things and evolve as professionals. So we welcome you as one of our own, Desiree, and we're really inspired by your. Thank you for giving back to Broward College today and for offering to share your experience and insights for free with our alumni and friends community. Welcome, Desiree.
Thank you so much, Anthony. It's really a pleasure to be here. And as you mentioned, I'm still a teacher at heart. So even though real estate is my current profession, I definitely see a space for myself as a teacher within the world of real estate. So what I'd like to do is just discuss a little bit what happened in the pre-COVID years and kind of bring us up to where we are today. And then at that point, we can, answer questions that everybody has. So just to give you an idea, in the pre-COVID era, the market was strong to neutral. It was still, there still wasn't a lot of inventory. Buyers were still competing for properties that were considered nice properties, that had good condition and whatnot. And the interest rates were in the between 4 and 5% range for a 30-year mortgage. So that's what was considered normal. And we were kind of just going along. And then all of a sudden, COVID hit. And that would be the next slide. Perfect. And so what happened in those, when that first quarantine came, nobody knew what to do. It was like, where's the market going to go? What's going to happen? So we started to see a stall in the real estate market. And then the government put out programs where people could put their mortgage into forbearance. And when a lot of people went into forbearance, then money stopped circulating. And as we know, we have a capitalist economy. Money needs to circulate. So how are we going to get money back into the economy? How are we going to stimulate spending? So the Fed lowered the interest rates. And that's when the wild, wild west of real estate broke out in 2020. And, we lived 2 insane, crazy years with those low interest rates. So after those 2 crazy years in about early 2022, we started to see the Fed raise interest rates to stem inflation. And almost immediately what we saw was that the volume of sales began to drop throughout the year. And then we saw home prices continue to rise. It was kind of, everybody thought the bottom of the market would drop out, but it really didn't. They continued to rise, even though there was 40% less sales within December 2021 to December 2022. So in that year of 2022, the median sale price of a property in Broward County actually went up from $350,000 to $375,000. So the market remained strong despite the fact that there was less sales because of rising interest rates. So, and when we fast forward to today, we continue to see throughout 2023 the actual dollar volume of sales go down for most of the year, and then they pick up toward the end. And the number of closed sales also went down throughout that entire year. The median price, though, of properties, it went up the entire year. It didn't come down at all in Broward County throughout the year. So it's like these weird stats that we think normally they would accompany each other. They're not really accompanying each other because there's less sales, there's less volume, but the prices are still going up. So right now, if we look at a single family homes and condos, we're still at 5 months inventory. And what that means in layman's terms is that we're getting to a point in the market where we're reaching somewhat of a neutral spot. It's not sellers, it's kind of leaving a seller's market. We're getting into a neutral space, and we may be heading over to a buyer's market if there's a lot more inventory that begins to present itself, which I think it might with everything that's going on with the condos. And I've seen a bunch of questions about the condos. So I'm going to show you some stats and you can see the difference between the amount of inventory for single family homes and condos. So this is all the properties in Broward County. And this is where we have our 5 months supply of inventory. So, and from a year ago, that's up 3 months. So we can see that the market is changing. When it's, less than 3 or 4 months, we're heavily in a seller's market, but now it's starting to shift. And so that's where we're getting into that neutral range, where we're going to see a change over to maybe potentially a buyer's market. So if we go to the next slide. So the single family homes inventory is just over 3 months. So it's still slightly in a seller's, moving over to that neutral space as far as the supply of inventory. And something else that I'd also like to point out is that the number of days it takes to go to contract or to sell, it's still more than what we were used to during the COVID years, even though it's down from last year. And during COVID, we were used to things happening very quickly. You'd put a property on the market and it would be sold, and just like overnight, you had 40 offers and $100,000 over. So people are still kind of getting used to it taking so long to sell a property, and those are the little things that indicate the shift that we're going through. And if we go over here, to the condos. So now look at the condos, the months of supply of inventory. We have 6.2 months supply of inventory, and this changed drastically in the last few months because of everything that's going on with the condos. And I know that that's a concern for people, again, because of the questions that came in and the questions that are in the chat. So what I'm seeing as far as the condo market is that it is becoming a buyer's market very quickly for anybody that wants to buy a condo. But there's a big asterisk next to that. There's opportunity, but there's also a challenge because you have to vet the condo very carefully to make sure that they have stable finances, because otherwise you could be buying into something that's going to end up costing you a lot of money, that's going to drop a huge assessment into your lap, and then you're stuck with it, So the condo and the single family home market, they're different right now, which is another like interesting context that this current market has presented to us. If we go to the next slide, and that's basically bringing us up to today. This is my contact information if anybody wants to contact me, but that's just basically all I wanted to say as far as where the market is, just so everybody can understand where we are today and kind of, the difference between the condo and single family. And I do believe that the single family homes is going to become even more interesting for people to buy because they're not beholden to a condo association. You don't have that that fear that some assessment is going to get dropped in your lap. Could the roof fall through? It could, absolutely. There's that risk too. But the point is you're not beholden to this entire association and assessments that may come through that may actually be worse for you in the long run. It could be better, but it could be worse too.
Okay, well, that context is really fascinating, and it's wonderful that your stats are just kind of fresh, representing the market the way it is right now. let's
Mhm.
look then at some of these questions that have just come up since they were tied in. Thank you for the webinar. I'm curious what feedback Desiree may have on condos and reserves when banks are not approving due to reserves. Any insight or news?
So, the insight is if they're not approving it due to reserves, if you're asking as a buyer or as a seller, there's really, as a buyer, you have to find a place that the lender is going to approve. It's that simple. Either that, or you have to come up with the 30% down payment in order to forego the full condo review and actually purchase into the condo. Now, if it's a $300,000 condo, you're talking over $100,000 to buy a condo. Okay. So if you're talking about as a seller, you may have to pay those assessments. You may have to pay into the reserve fund to sell it, or you may have to just wait for a cash buyer. So it depends on kind of what side that you're on. And what we're seeing in the news lately is that we're seeing the condo inventory go extremely high, like the stats showed. It's going extremely high. I can give you one example. I put one condo on the market in January. There were 17 units in that complex. Today there are 40. So it more than doubled. And this is a place that used to have maybe 3 to 5 units on the market. So at 17, it was already high. Now it's at 40. And what that's going to do is going to drive the price of everybody else's units down because there's so many to choose from.
Hmm. All right, well, Gino is asking, I'm just curious about the HOA issues with boards and fees that have been affecting residents over the past few years. Do you see a resolution from the state in the near future?
Yeah, it's such a complex issue because all of a sudden you have condos that had $350 maintenance fees. Now they're like $700, $800, it's doubled. And, when people buy condos, they might just be starting out. They might not have these deep pockets. So, doubling your maintenance fees can put people a little bit in a bind. The problem is, Gino, is that they have to have these fees because of the laws, as you mentioned, and for reserves in order to maintain the condominium. Do I see a resolution? I think that the state may potentially push the requirement for reserves to another year, so you're not going to be required to have it by 2025. But push it down to 2026 to give people some time. Because another consideration is that a lot of people here in Florida, they come to retire, they're on fixed incomes, and these are people that don't have deep pockets and they're being affected. And that's why we're seeing so many condos go on the market. So I do believe that the state might push it down, the requirement down, maybe another year to give people more time. You're
And
welcome,
Janet
Gina.
has a follow-up question. Is there a way to find these condos, Desiree, that have the right reserve or finances besides associations? Is there some kind of tool or resource that people
Huh.
can?
Janet, since I started in real estate, I wish that this existed. I actually started my own database because I had so many clients coming in from out of the country and they would need to know this information, like, are you allowed to rent? If you are allowed to rent, is there a waiting period? Does the association have reserves? Because you have some people that have like a 5% down payment looking to buy in a condo, and if they don't have full reserves, then they basically can't buy there because the lender won't approve them. And so the way that I have organized is I created my own database, but there really does need to be a database because there isn't a way to find these condos. There and the MLS doesn't provide the data fields for us as realtors to input that information. So sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not, depending on who the agent is on the other side. They'll just say, here, call the association, figure it out yourself. So you have to run around trying to find this information. So there's no way. I wish that there was, but there is not.
Okay. Okay. Well, I do have some other questions lined up for you.
Sure.
But folks, those of you who are listening, watching, please feel free to enter a question into the chat or in the Q&A. So this one is kind of general. This is rent related, Desiree. How has the demand for rental properties changed over the past few years in Broward County?
So, before COVID, it was already kind of crazy, but with COVID and a lot of people realizing that they could, work in sunny South Florida and make New York pay or another state pay, a lot more money and live for less money, they came down here. And so we started to see the rise in property values if you wanted to buy. And then it spilled over into the rental. There just wasn't enough properties to accommodate all these people. So it's the basic law of supply and demand. You had a very strong demand and not a very high supply. So what we ended up seeing was just everything went up astronomically in a very short amount of time. So that's how it's affected rentals here in Broward County. It's just driven the prices up to where, people have to make a lot of money to even to rent like a little small apartment. A 2-bedroom is reasonably like $2,000 these days, where before the pandemic it might have been like 1,400.
So what advice do you have, Desiree, for first-time renters looking in Broward?
So it depends on what kind of a rental that you're looking for. If you can deal directly with the owner of a property, that's probably one of the easiest ones because it's a human to human transaction. But if you have a realtor and they have a realtor and you're trying to rent in a place where there's a condo association, that's the most difficult because you have to create like a rental profile, a rental application, your ID. You have to prove that you make 2.5 to 3 times the amount in rent. You have to show your income. You have to show your credit. You have to show that you don't have a criminal background. You have to show that you don't have evictions. You have to show that you're going to be a good tenant. So you have to create this strong rental profile. So my advice would be have that strong rental profile ready to go. If for whatever reason you don't have a strong rental profile, we all make mistakes. Our credit gets dinged for this or that or whatever. Something happens in our life and it's beyond our control. We're responsible people, but you couldn't help what happened to you. And maybe you ran up a very large hospital bill, that's on your credit or something. And you just don't have the credit score. You can go to a corporate rental community and those they don't care. As long as you can pay the rent, they don't really care much about you. They just want you to rent. And some of those places will if you sign a year lease, they might give you a couple months free rent, but the rent does tend to be a little bit more in the corporate rental communities.
Interesting. In terms of rentals, again, have you noticed any trends in the type of rental properties that are most popular? Apartments versus condos versus single-family homes.
They're all popular. There's just still such a demand that the minute you put something on the market, it gets snapped up really fast.
Okay. Let me jump back into the chat here. I see we've got a
Sure.
little activity there. Randy is asking, is there something to look out for when a condo has no HOA fee? Hmm,
Run, Randy. That's what I can tell you because they probably don't have their finances in order. Every condo has to have an HOA fee. And if it's low, and by low, I mean like in the $200-300 range, there's probably some assessment lurking in the background. They may just be waiting to do the study, to the reserve study to find out how they're going to assess the owners for the repairs and the reserve fund and those kind of things. But realistically, nowadays, a condo HOA fee is going to be in the $700-800 range easily in order to cover those things. If they haven't been doing it traditionally in the past, if they've had like a higher HOA fee in the past in the $500-600 range, they're probably okay financially. But a lot of condo associations voted not to raise the maintenance payment, and so they had zero reserve funds, and so that's why they're getting dinged right now. But those that have opted to pay into the reserve historically, they're not suffering as much, and they're more solvent compared to the ones that did not.
Letitia's asking, what's the minimum down payment for a condo? Is there, what are you seeing?
So there's 2 layers to the minimum down payment for a condo. And it depends on the reserves. Let's just use a hypothetical situation. There's a condo and they have full reserves. So the lender will not require a large down payment. You could probably buy that with like a 5% down payment.
Hmm.
However, the association might say you can only buy here if you can put 20% down. So it depends on the condo. They're like these little sovereign territories. They can create their own rules. So even though a bank will finance that condo, the condo association might say, no, 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 we will only take you if you have 20% down. So you're kind of, there's two fronts that you have to fight this war on to try to get into a condo. And then if it's not that way, it could be the reverse. The condo association is like, no problem, you could buy here with 5% down. But then the lender looks at their finances and says, well, they don't have sufficient reserves. So we'll loan you the money, but you have to put, 20, 25, 30% down.
Yeah, and I see here Irina is telling us that in terms of rentals, the cheapest that she's found in the area is 2,100 for a one bedroom.
Yes, yes. Depending on the area, that's very possible. You can find some less expensive one bedrooms, but nowadays what we're starting to see is that they're fewer and far between. They're starting to become a rarity. Before people would see like a $3,500 rental, oh my God, it's like a mansion. Now, it could be a little two-bedroom house, with one bathroom or something like that. It's just the rental rates have skyrocketed recently.
And I think there was a question here about how competitive is the rental market. I think you touched on that and what strategies renters can use. And if I
Mhm.
understood you correctly, that was about just building a really strong renter's profile. Uh,
That's right. And then one thing I do want to mention about the renter profile, there used to be a trend in real estate where, your agent would tell you, well, write a letter so they could know about you, and kind of sway them on the more personal level. But we've shied away from that in real estate because within that, there can be many fair housing violations.
uh,
So do not create a rental profile that really tells anything about you personally for you and for the person on the other end. Be very objective. This is my credit score, this is what I make. They want to see objective characteristics. So when I say a strong rental profile, that's what it should include: objective information about yourself. No love letters. That's what we call them. No love letters.
I know that we had a question sent in from one of my colleagues uh, asking about, does the job of a realtor include providing information or resources for people who need help with financing or certain particular situations?
Like assistance. So yeah, that's a question that I get often. It's really not in our wheelhouse per se. However, Um, there are government programs, and you just have to know how to direct the person to the right mortgage lender if it's a down payment assistance program for buying a house, or to the right county program if it's for rental assistance.
So in terms of home buying, what are you seeing about key factors that are influencing people's decisions to buy homes in Broward?
Okay, so the general and the universal concern is the cost of owning a home. Because with the property values that went up, property taxes also went up. So when a person buys a home, like a $500,000 house nowadays, and you haven't owned a house before, there's no way for you to port over your savings, your homestead savings. You're starting at zero. So you're looking at a tax rate of about $10,000. And that's going to be tacked on to your mortgage payment. So right there is the $10,000 right out of the gate, almost, more or less here in Broward. And then you have to consider homeowners insurance, which has gone up astronomically as well, right? So when you have your mortgage payment, you have principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. And then at 7% interest rates versus, 3.5, some people got under 3. The difference right there just in the interest rate is almost $1,000 a month. So the concern is the actual cost to own a property. That's the universal concern. However, if buying a property is going to cost you the same as renting every month, definitely buy. forget that the taxes are 10 grand a year. Don't even look at them. But if the math is going to work out and you can own a property and it makes financial sense to do so versus renting, then definitely do that again. And that's with the little asterisk, because if it's a condo, you have to make sure you look at certain things to make sure that it's a wise financial decision. But generally, buying is always better than renting if you can afford it.
Are there any resources online someone is asking that you could point to for somebody who needs assistance with rental?
There is. It's any sort of rental assistance is done through the county,
Okay.
and they have, I believe it's the Broward County Housing Authority. I can find out for sure if it's possible the exact name, but it's through the county.
Okay. Are there any emerging neighborhoods or areas in Broward that buyers should keep an eye on for potential investment?
So, as we know, Broward County is a major hotspot right now. There's tons of revitalization going on. And what we've seen in a lot, actually in 250 cities in the entire state of Florida, but many here in Broward County, they have created what's called the Community Redevelopment Agency, a CRA. And a CRA is created in order to take a blighted part of that city space and revitalize it by, finding ways to invest more money into it. So anywhere where you see a CRA, anywhere in and around those areas, I would say might be somewhere that you should research to find out if it makes sense. Oakland Park, where I live, has a CRA. Pompano Beach has one. I believe Dania has one. And a few more cities in Broward, they're really doing this push to kind of revitalize these areas that have been traditionally neglected. And those are the kind of areas where you can go in, and it might not look beautiful right now, but 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, all of a sudden it's the hottest part of town. So those are the type of areas I would look at personally if I were going to buy another property.
Okay. No, I know that you've touched on this a bit, but I just wonder about the continuing impact. Somebody had asked, what impact have low mortgage rates had on the buying market? How has that, evolved into what we're seeing today?
Okay, so yes, that's a good question, because sellers, people that have a 2.5%, 3%, 3.5 mortgage rate, interest rate, they don't want to sell. They want to stay or they want to rent. So we've had less inventory on the market. We're starting to see the rates of inventory go up, but we're seeing a lot of the condos, remember, and the single family homes are almost 3 months behind. They're, because they're holding on to their properties. They don't want to sell at a low interest rate to go into like a 7% interest rate right now. So that's why we've seen these traditionally low inventory numbers. I can't hear you.
All right. I think I muted myself.
No problem.
Another question that was sent in was, what challenges the buyers face in terms of affordability? I think you touched on that, but and bidding wars. Are we still seeing bidding wars like we did a few years ago?
Not so much. It might happen here and there, but rather than be the norm these days, it's more the exception.
Okay.
We're just not seeing it as much, no.
Are there any specific property types like waterfront, luxury, single family that are particularly sought after in our area?
Affordable property types,
Okay.
those are the ones that people are seeking, because that's where the majority of people reside in financially, right? The middle class. So affordable properties, luxury waterfront properties are for fewer parts of the population that can, afford those very high prices. So affordable homes are what, is really needed. And that's the biggest demand, are those kind of homes.
Desiree, are we still seeing folks come down from other states, with a bit of cash in their pockets, buying up properties down here?
We're still seeing that at South Florida. So you have people coming from other states, but you also have the influx of people coming from South America, Latin America, where political things are happening that, people are opting to leave before economic prospects there get worse. And a lot of these people, when they come with lots of money, and so they're able to buy properties cash. So and as long as I can remember being a realtor, that has been a significant trend in South Florida real estate.
Okay. Let's jump into the chat where we have a question
Mhm.
from Gabriel. Gabriel's asking, is it unwise to open a new equity line of credit on a primary property in order to purchase an investment property at this time? Or will there be a better time or scenario to accomplish that?
So what I would say to Gabriel is you have to look at the numbers. It's an objective endeavor. If it makes financial sense for you to take out an equity line and buy a property and the numbers work out, then why wouldn't you do it? But if it's going to cost you money every month to take out that equity line and you're going to be strapped financially, don't do it. Wait a little bit, until the time is right. I have a client that's considering doing this, and he's considering doing an equity line where he'll only pay interest on the loan for 5 years. He actually won't be obligated to pay any principal, and he's thinking that that context might work for him, and that's the direction he's going to move in. So it depends on if the numbers work. It's very objective. Either they work or they don't. And if they work, there's no reason not to make the investment.
And as Christy Jonas is saying, timing is important. I was wondering, when is the best time to look into purchasing property in Florida or anywhere for that matter? Before school semester ends? What time of
So
the year do we say? Yeah.
yeah, so South Florida is really kind of a market unto its own. It has, marches to the beat of its own drum. There's always, people coming in and out. It's a very transient state, right? Where we always have movement here. But if you're looking to buy, I would say just hang on a little bit, because the way that the inventory is going up, I really think it's going to start to favor buyers soon. And that's going to put buyers in a position where they can, maybe ask the seller to concede certain things to them. For example, like some money to buy down interest points, or, perhaps lower than asking price on the purchase price for the contract of the property. So, do we see little bumps of movement during certain times? We do, but it's South Florida. Like I said, it's always moving. Sometimes it just moves a little more than others.
Eternal summer. Uh, Desiree, what role does new construction play in Broward's real estate market?
So new construction closes the gap for the lack of inventory. The problem in Broward is we're not making there's not much dirt left, right? There's not many places to buy the property to build the new construction. So traditionally what we've seen is that it's provided houses when, people are looking for homes and they just aren't there. But I believe we're going to start to see less and less of these here in Broward County, because there's just not that much space.
Given the tightness of the real estate market here, what are the shifts that you have observed in demographics or preferences?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, the question was, have you observed any shifts in buyer demographics or preferences over the past few years?
Not really. I mean, there's the only thing I would say is the influx. I feel like the influx from out of the state is greater, whether it be domestic influx or international. I just feel like there's more of it happening.
Another question, what are the current trends in property appreciation rates in Broward?
So they're going up. They continue to go up. And over the, and I can, if anybody wants to see them, I can pull the stats from Florida Realtors. But over the last year, the median price of homes has just gone up steadily. It didn't falter once in all of Broward County. Depending on certain pockets, it may have gone up more than in the county as a whole, or may have even gone down in some places. But generally, in the entire county, it just went up. The median sale price went up the entire year last year.
How do property taxes and insurance costs impact the overall affordability for homeowners? Or does it just depend on?
Oh, it makes a huge impact because they roll everything into the mortgage payment, right? Property, principal, interest, taxes, insurance. So when you first take out the mortgage, you have to kind of pay into that escrow account. So the mortgage company pays your taxes and pays your insurance fees. But with these fees going up so much, like insurance fees, going up so much depending on your house, if you have a new roof, if where you're located, if it's a flood zone or not, they've just become so astronomical that I have seen people not be able to buy a property because the amount of insurance pushes the payment beyond what they can afford. So depending on where it is, the condition of the house, it could potentially make it not favorable for somebody to buy, and it could actually push them out of buying it at all, depending on what the final payment would be. And as far as insurance, if you buy a house where somebody's lived in it for 40 years and they're paying like $1,000 a year in property taxes, you'll be okay for the first year that you own the house. You're going to get their tax rate. But then the following year, when you apply for your homestead and they realize the property has been sold and they reassess it, that's when you're going to get hammered with that new tax rate. So those are things that you have to consider when you buy the house is, the adjustment in the tax rate after that first year.
What advice do you have for potential sellers, people thinking about looking to list their homes in the current market?
So it's still a good market to sell in. There's still a demand to sell. It's not crazy like it was during COVID. So I would say be patient. Houses are not selling overnight, number one. Number two, price realistically. Be very realistic in your pricing. Pricing is an objective endeavor. Your house is not worth what you feel it's worth. It's worth what the market says it's worth, what somebody is willing to pay for it. So be very objective when it comes to pricing. And when you do get a contract, if you do put your house on the market and you do get a contract, the buyers now we're starting to see them have more demands. Of course, some demands are ridiculous, and it's understandable why a seller would say, well, no, thank you, because that's a little too much. But be open and flexible to maybe meeting some of their demands so that you can get to the closing table. And lastly, call me for a consultation, of course, and we can talk about it.
Another question from Christy Yunus, this time on insurance.
Mhm.
Is there a way to not pay the insurance while purchasing property? If you put down a down payment of over 20%, what are the benefits compared to less than 20% down payment? Okay, sorry, that's two questions. What is there a way to not pay the insurance while purchasing property? And
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, so is there a way not to pay property insurance? There is. You have to buy it cash. If you own the property outright, you don't have to pay insurance. And I know a lot of people have opted to do that, people that own their property outright, because insurance is so astronomical. It just they don't pay for the insurance. They can self-insure. You could take that $10,000 or whatever you're going to pay in insurance that year and set it aside in an account and not look at it. And if something happens, you have the money there. And then if something does happen and it's great, then you just deal with it when it happens, if it does happen.
And his follow-up question is, if you put a down payment down of over 20%, what are the benefits compared to less than 20% down payment?
So if you put 20% or more on a conventional loan, then you will not be responsible for PMI, which is personal mortgage insurance. So it will remove the necessity to have to pay that for the life of the loan. Now, if you have an FHA loan, the PMI is required throughout the life of the loan. So if you put 20% down on a conventional loan, you will not have to pay the PMI. And it's not an astronomical amount of money, but it's going to add up at the end of the year, depending, on how much the purchase of your home is. So that's where you wouldn't pay insurance by putting down 20%. Otherwise, the only way to avoid having to put homeowners insurance on your property is to own it outright.
Okay. Are there any regulatory changes or local policies affecting real estate transactions in Broward? Is there any shift in policy or?
So there, Ron DeSantis, he put out a law, a requirement that we couldn't sell to certain foreign nationals. I haven't seen it. It hasn't come up in any of my transactions. It's very specific. It's not like if you're this nationality, you absolutely cannot buy anything. It's not like that. But I haven't seen it come up in any transaction. So yes, there is something, but has it affected me personally? It hasn't affected anything so far.
Uh, what are the prospects for future growth and development in our area?
I think they're quite great because we're talking about South Florida. Miami, we know has grown astronomically in the last 10, 20 years. It's becoming like a little tropical Manhattan, I would say, if I may. Like a little tropical Manhattan. It's very highly densely populated, and some people don't want to live in such dense population centers. So a lot of people are opting to come to Broward and even Palm Beach. And I've even moved people further up the coast where they're looking to, still have a nice place to live, but not being so crowded. Nevertheless, here, there's just a lot of revitalization going on. So we're going to see Broward continue to appreciate. I have absolutely no doubt with all the CRAs that we have in the different cities in Broward over the next 10, 20 years, I believe it's just going to continue to go up. Could we potentially hit a bump in the road? We could potentially, but we bounce back. It's South Florida. We're very unique.
Here's a question, going back a little bit, but somebody was asking, what impacts a shift in your assessment of your property? And is there a way to mitigate any kind of changes?
So assessment, if they mean like the value of the
The
property.
value, yes. Yeah.
So the way that we calculate the value of a property before we put it on the market is we look at other properties that are similar and that have sold. And then we make adjustments to the subject or to the comparable property to kind of come up with a value. So, I mean, if something bad happens to the property that like floods it or the roof falls, obviously that will affect it. Um, Conversely, if you put in a new kitchen, it's going to help the value of your property, new bathroom, those kind of things next to your neighbor's house. Like if your neighbor has the exact same house and they haven't done anything to it since 1960 and you've completely redone yours is obviously going to be worth more. So that's taken into consideration. And that's what helps the property value and the recent comps in the area. You can't want to sell a property for a lot more than the comps. So let's just say that a single family home, the comparable value of properties is 350,000. You can't want to sell your property for 650,000 if it's like the other houses. It's just the market can't bear that number. So when you're looking at property values, you have to compare it to the other ones. So there's the external and then there's the internal, right? The comparables around your property and the things that you do to your property. And the one thing that I just really want to highlight when it comes to improvements in the property that can improve the value is cost does not equal value. So if a kitchen costs you $50,000, it does not mean that your house is automatically worth $50,000 more because it's not.
Mm.
People have, there's this mistake, this perception that if I spend $50,000 on this kitchen, my $350,000 house is going to be worth 400,000. No, it's not. So those are good improvements to make, but I would say if you're going to spend that kind of money, enjoy the new kitchen and then sell it later, don't make the improvement to sell it within a few months, make the improvement to enjoy it and sell it down the road.
I think some of that thinking too is propagated by we have this fascination with home shows on television,
Yes.
like Love It or List It, where you see renovations and then the impact of those renovations, and they don't always and they seem to be very profitable. But I think that's some of that what's behind in there, that that sense that a dollar in is a dollar out, in terms of how increasing your home's value.
Right. But it's reality TV, and what do we know about reality TV? It's not real at all. So that's what I
Uh,
would say.
we have a question from Nisa.
Sure.
Does the tax percent change for someone that has inherited a property if the previous owners were paying 3% interest on the home?
So it depends. It depends on how the property is conveyed to the heirs. So I'm not an attorney, but I can tell you what I know about conveying the property as an inheritance. So I was speaking to an attorney and she said if you have the property in trust, the person who is the main person of the trust, the trustee, when they pass and it goes on to another trustee and other benefit, there's no change in the tax rate, is what she told me. And I can get her information if somebody wants to consult with her more specifically. However, you can also have convey a property with the ladybird deed. And it doesn't have anything to do with Lady Bird Johnson. It's just a term that was used to describe this kind of a deed, wherein the person who has the property in their name has created a deed that says, you know, the minute that I pass, this property goes to this person, and that person. So then you completely avoid the probate process. But I was told that when you have this ladybird deed, then the tax rate can go up.
Interesting. Okay.
Versus a trust where it won't, the ladybird deed, the tax will recompute. But it also depends on people's individual situations. So that's what I would say, consult with an attorney that does wills, trusts, and those sort of things. Because I'm not an attorney, this is not legal advice. This is just something that I know from being in the business.
Desiree, I'm curious, do you see many corporate buyers as opposed to individuals buying single family homes, condos?
I do see corporate buyers. Anytime I list a property, I get, I don't know, 10, 20 offers from these investors, buy houses fast, and you're listing a house for 450 and they send you a $300,000 offer. So you see a lot of those people trying to really take advantage of maybe somebody that needs to get cash fast. So they're out there. There's a lot of these little companies out there. Then there's the bigger companies like Invitation Homes. They own thousands of single family homes around the country. And if you look in any given neighborhood at the property records, you'll see that they own 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 homes. So they're out there. You have the small corporations like individuals, and then you have the bigger ones. They're definitely out there.
All right. I don't see any more questions yet in the chat. I do want to, before we close out, we'll reshare your contact information, and it will also be available in the summary email that we will send to everyone with a link to the recording. Oh, thank you, Kristen. So there you go, folks. Take a screenshot. There are Desiree's details.
Thank you very much. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. If you want just, to call me, as I mentioned, I'm still a teacher at heart. If you just have questions and you need somebody who's in the business to help you answer them, I'm happy to answer them. Call me, text me. I'm here to help.
That's right. I did forget to ask. I know you took a few courses at Broward. Do you remember your experience then? And what was the context? Yeah.
Yes. Well, I was working on my teaching certificate, and so I needed to take education courses. So I did a lot of my education courses at Broward.
Okay. Which campus did you go to?
At the central campus in Davie.
Central campus in Davie.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Great.
It was before, virtual classes and those sort of things. You actually had to go. So it was in person. Yeah.
I see a lot of appreciation coming over in the chat. So thank you, everyone. I would like to extend an invitation to everyone, especially if you were an alum of Panku magazine. Desiree, I don't know if you're familiar with Panku magazine. It's almost as old as Broward College itself. It began in 1965. It is an enduring student literary and art magazine. So it's there's a faculty advisor, but it's really totally student driven. And this year we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of that publication. And Alumni and Friends is involved with that. And we've reached out to a number of alumni who are going to be showing up, and some of them, their works will be reproduced in the publication that will be available at the event that's taking place on April the 18th, Davie Central Campus. But I'd like to extend an invitation for everyone to attend and to support and really just to witness the incredible creativity that we have among the students here at Broward College. I would love for everyone to bookmark what you see our website, alumni.broward.edu. It's easy to remember. And alumni.broward.edu/events. Please bookmark that, because that's where you'll get updates when we add a new webinar or a new in-person event. We're also looking for alumni volunteers. If you would like to come and assist with at a commencement, which is a really special time, we need help there, and it allows you to get in front of graduating students and congratulate them and celebrate the achievement of graduation and education. So there you go, folks. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you, Desiree.
My pleasure. Thank you again for inviting me, Anthony. It was really great to talk to everybody. Thank you.
Okay. And everyone will receive an email. We'll also reproduce this in our newsletter at the end of March, and the webinar will be available on the website shortly. Thank you, everyone, for participating tonight.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.